Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and welcome to whatever episode it is. I think it's like episode 8 or 7 or something. Anywho, getting on with it. This weekend had a lot of crazy plays and crazy games. Starting all the way back at Thursday Night Football, there was some crazy touchdown grabs, and ending with the Eagles had quite a few top plays of the week. We will touch on that here in a second, but I just wanted to say before we get started, please leave a like and subscribe to show your support here. That would be much appreciated. Also, follow us on Twitter and tweet at us. I'll be more than happy to interact with you guys online with any of your NFL takes. But with all the pleasantries out of the way, let's hop straight into it. We're going to hop straight into this Eagles past weekend game against the Jaguars. Eagles wore Kelly Green at home. I was at the game. It was an amazing game to be at. Temperature was almost perfect. The fans were great. As per usual. Eagles beat the Jags 28-23. I have a lot of thoughts on this game, so this segment might take a little bit longer than normal. We'll see, but just getting started. Looking at the stats, let's go over to the Jags first. Trevor Lawrence went 16 for 31, 169 yards, and 2 interceptions. On the ground, Travis Etienne had 3 carries for 24 yards. Obviously, I guess they wanted to this was his first weekend back, so it seems like they didn't want to put more stress on his injury. I believe he had a hamstring, I believe. I didn't want to put too much stress on that in his first game coming back. Tank Bigsby had 8 carries for 22 yards, and Trevor Lawrence had 5 carries for 8 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Receiving, their top receiver was Evan Ingram, 5 receptions for 45 yards. He did not record a touchdown on the day. Their next highest receiver was Parker Washington. 3 receptions for 41 yards. Surprisingly quiet day for the rookie wideout Brian Thomas Jr. Only 2 receptions for 22 yards. Looking at this defense, they weren't able to. We'll touch on it in a second. They were able to turn the ball over, or get the Eagles to turn the ball over once. We'll touch on that in a second. But through the air, they were not able to intercept Jalen Hurts. They got 3 sacks on Jalen, compared to, I think, our 2 sacks on Trevor. So not a lot of pressure got to either one of these quarterbacks. Looking at the raw stats of the Eagles, another big day for Jalen Hurts. He went 18 for 24, 230 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Another big game for Jalen. This was more of a Jalen game here, similar to against the Bengals. They've relied on Hurts when it mattered most, and which definitely helps build confidence in the quarterback and in the fans in the quarterback as well. Looking at rushing, Saquon dominated. 27 carries, 159 yards, and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts on the ground had 13 carries for 67 yards and a touchdown. Through the air, Devontae Smith was our top receiver with 4 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. I feel like these are 2 consecutive games now that he's had since coming back from his injury or his concussion, where he's had at least 4 receptions, at least 45 or 85 yards, and at least 1 touchdown in a game. Saquon through the air, another big factor, 3 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown only played in the first half, had 2 receptions for 36 yards, and Jahan Dotson had a really big catch. It was his only catch of the night. It was 1 reception for 36 yards, but he was bobbling the catch a little bit, so that was very good. On the defensive side, we were able to intercept Trevor Lawrence twice, with Nakobe Dean obviously sealing the deal at the end of the game with a interception in the end zone. Uh, Overall, looking at the raw stats, it was a really great day for Jalen Hurts. He hasn't thrown or he hasn't turned over the ball in any fashion in the past 4 games, which is the longest streak of his career. Hopefully, he can keep that going, but eventually he's going to turn over the ball. It's just when, and you got to hope that it's not when it matters most. Special teams also got a fumble early on. It was the Eagles just stalled out close to their own end zone. They punted the ball. Sidney Brown was able to knock it out, and I believe Keely Ringo was able to recover the ball. But solid performance from special teams as well, which I don't really shout out enough on here for most teams, and especially the Eagles. Really solid day on special teams there. We got to talk about the Saquon Barkley hurdle because everybody in the media is obviously talking about it. So I watched the play in real time, and I don't think I entirely realized what happened until I looked up at the scoreboard. But that was some solid effort by Saquon Barkley. Just the first 2 moves of that play, not even the hurdle. The first 2 moves were solid effort to evade the tackle to try to get the first down in open field. First he had like a little juke, like a little stutter step, and then he spun on the second guy. Saquon said he knew that there was going to be another tackler coming down, so instinctively he jumped, but I don't think he meant to spin while jumping. So it was nice to see the first Saquon Eagles hurdle, which that was insane, and I think everybody else has really talked about it enough at this point. But that was a great play by Saquon. There were several good plays. That was probably the best one, which overshadowed the amazing DeVonta Smith touchdown catch to put the Eagles up by uh, another score. That was a great ball by Jalen, and that was a great catch by DeVonta Smith, which came off of the back of a few plays earlier. They had a deep, I think it was a deep post. It looked like Jalen hit DeVonta for a ton of yards. I want to say like 30 to 40 yards in one play, which was really impressive on that front. Overall, it was a really impressive outing for the Eagles. Now, we have to get into 2 major things that I hated in this game, to say quite frankly. And is once we were up 22-0 at half. Yeah, we brought out Shady McCoy. That was fun. Everybody had fun there. But Sirianni just can't get out of his own way. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's going to be the same thing for the rest of the season if Sirianni can't just let Kellen Moore. I can't tell whether those bad plays where it was kind of a bootleg. I couldn't tell whether it was, or a play action. I couldn't tell whether that was a Sirianni or a Kellen Moore call, but it looked similar to what Sirianni called last year that didn't work. It made Jalen run around in the backfield, eventually either get sacked or throw the ball away. It's not going to work, especially against good teams that are coming up like I don't want to say it, but good teams like the Cowboys, good teams like the Commanders, good teams like the Rams, and good teams like the Ravens. That's not going to work. This little run out and try to just wait until somebody gets open, it's not going to work because these teams can put pressure on Jalen. These calls need to be put in the back of the playbook and probably never touched again, in my opinion. I think that was quite embarrassing for Sirianni, especially, and him going for it on the second down the first 2 times. I can understand that. And I believe one of the first 2 that were that they didn't count did actually cross the plane after the game, somebody was able to figure it out. Somebody was able to like triangulate it and figure out whether the ball passed the plane. But yeah, it did, which will lead me into the next point I have to make in a second here. But uh, honestly, Sirianni, you have to take the points where we can get it, especially coming up against these good teams. We just have to take the points to continue to build our lead. There's a point, I feel like every young head coach should be aggressive. Yeah, to prove, or if it's just your culture to be aggressive, then just you can be aggressive. You see it up in Detroit, it works. In Philly, it works. I mean, both head coaches have honestly turned around their franchises a bit and made them better for it. But there's a point in every head coach's career when they have to decide that yes, aggressive is what I want to be, but I have to take the points that are ahead of me rather than trying to bank on points that I could get. Uh, I think Sirianni left like 9 points on the field that we could have gotten, which would have made this game so much more comfortable and not coming down to the wire. I was so prepared because I stayed the entire game. I was so prepared to have to go into overtime again in the Kelly Greens just to beat the Jaguars. Which, mind you, the Jaguars aren't a bad team. They they made they just lost to the Packers 30-27, which the Packers are a good team by all standards. So this team is doing enough to keep themselves in it, but Trevor isn't really pushing them past the line that they need to be a playoff caliber team. Um, the refs during this game, might I say, were horrible. That they were some of the worst refs I think I've personally have seen in a while in the NFL. And this has been a theme all this season that I was hoping would not exist. That the refs in the off season would clean up some of their stuff, maybe clean house a little bit, bring in some new faces. But no, we continue to allow these people to screw up good games. Because the Saquon fumble, let's talk about that. The Saquon fumble, he was clearly tripped when the guy touched his leg. So he should have been down by contact. And they didn't call it during the time, which is fine. Because during the play, it looked like he just looked like he tripped on nothing. But when you reviewed it, there was one specific angle where you could clearly see that the Jaguars defender knocked out, I believe it was his right leg, and he fell forward. That is down by contact. By every means in the dictionary of the NFL, that is down by contact. So I don't know what these refs are seeing. And other plays, the 2-point conversion, that's difficult, but the replay should have caught that. So I'm not sure what New York is doing to miss all of these crucial calls in the game. That Saquon fumble led to a touchdown, which made the game even tighter for the Eagles to pull out and force Jalen to go down on a drive and throw a touchdown pass to Devontae Smith. Another thing, it was fourth and 10 or third and 10 at the final drive of the game. Avonte Maddox is covering, I want to say, Evan Ingram, and there was barely any contact. Yes, the Avonte Maddox was riding up right against him, which can sometimes lead to the penalty, but there was no way that Evan Ingram could have caught that ball from Trevor Lawrence, which was 5-10 yards down the field from where he ended up after running the route. And still they call defensive pass interference. And mind you, I don't know why Sirianni even put Avonte Maddox out on the field on a crucial fourth down or third down at the end of the game to seal the game. That's beyond me. But there should not have been any call there. But yet there was, which then gave the Jacksonville a new set of downs to go down and make the game even tighter. Even though Nakobe Dean did intercept the ball in the end zone, the refs are screwing Philly right now in every shape or form, whether it's leading to a touchdown or leading to a new set of downs. And sometimes, yes, I will say there are some self-inflicted wounds with penalties on the Eagles. Yes, I will completely admit that. But the stuff I saw today, or not today, the stuff that I saw on Sunday was a really bad look for the NFL and the refs. The NFL has to get their stuff together because this is starting to affect games more and more. I mean, if you look at the Minnesota Rams game, or Minnesota and Los Angeles game 2 weeks ago, almost at this point, that game, the Vikings had a chance to try to come back and win, but because the refs messed up so bad in not calling that face mask, it ended the game and took away a possible win from a team. So, NFL, please, I know you're probably not listening, but I don't really care, honestly. Stop trying to control the games. Let them play out. If it's an obvious holding call, obvious PI call, call that. But if it's just a little bit of contact, then don't call that. And I'm not sure what the review booth is doing either, but they need to get their shit together. All right, I don't know what they're doing up there that they're not calling these plays dead when they're obviously dead. But whatever. That was my little rant there. I think that went on for like 6 minutes, I guess. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah. So the Eagles game was fun. I always enjoy the Eagles game. That was my fourth Eagles game I've been to. So with all that being said, let's blitz through this past weekend's slate so we can get to a new segment that I have in a little bit. Going through quick, I previously mentioned it. Jets, Texans. Jets beat the Texans 21-13. C.J. Stroud was really underwhelming. Sorry. C.J. Stroud went 11 for 30, 191 yards. Joe Mixon had 24 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. He continues to be the heartbeat of this offense, honestly. Tank Dell had to be their top receiver because Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs are both out. Tank Dell had 6 receptions for 126 yards, no touchdowns. Robert Woods was their next closest receiver with 2 receptions for 44 yards. So that passing offense is going to take a hit with this loss of Stefon Diggs and Nico Collins. When I'm not even sure when he's coming back. Yeah. C.J. Stroud, I said earlier this year that he was most likely going to have a sophomore slump. And I didn't want it to happen. I just saw that it would most likely happen. And now we're starting to see it happen week after week where he's not putting up the same numbers he did last year because defenses are starting to adjust. Quickly going through the Jets here. Aaron Rodgers went 22 for 32, 211 yards and 3 touchdowns. Breece Hall had 15 carries and 74 yards. Davante Adams had 7 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. They finally got that connection going. Let's see them build on top of it in the next coming weeks. Garrett Wilson, even with Davante Adams still there, he's still Aaron Rodgers' top target with 9 receptions for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. One was an amazing play that is going to get way overshadowed by the Saquon Barkley touchdown. Or the Saquon Barkley spin. You know what I mean. But yeah, overall, good game for the Jets. They need to win and win now, so let's see them string together some wins here. Moving on, we got Panthers-Saints. Panthers squeak out a win against the Saints, 23-22 or 23-22. Looking at this Panthers offense, Bryce Young looked efficient. 16 for 26, 171, a touchdown and an interception. Chuba Hubbard had 15 carries for 72 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, they're able to spread the ball out a little bit. Jade- Jatavion Sanders had 4 receptions for 87 yards. Jalen Coker had 2 receptions for 36 yards. Xavier Legette had 4 receptions for 33 yards and a touchdown. Uh, Looking at the Saints, Derek Carr went 18 for 31, 236 yards and a touchdown. Alvin Kamara had a pretty explosive game, honestly. I'm surprised I didn't hear more about that. He had 29 carries for 155 yards. Receiving, Alvin Kamara led receiving as well. 6 receptions for 60 yards, with Taysom Hill being right behind him with 4 receptions for 41 yards. Overall, it looked like, hold on, where is it? Chris Olave did get knocked out of the game with a concussion. I believe this is like his 4th concussion in his career. So prayers up to Chris Olave. I remember he did get released from the hospital, I believe. They had to cart him out too, which was a little bit scary. Uh, but it was basically a hospital pass from Derek Carr. Overall, I guess I don't know what this says more about either team, whether the Panthers are just going to squeak out maybe 1 or 2 more wins, or the Saints are never going to win again. We're going to see about that. Anybody that loses against the Panthers are most likely going to fire their head coach. So yeah. Next up, we have Commanders Giants. Commanders beat the Giants 27-22. Jaden Daniels went 15 for 22, 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, he also had 8 carries for 35 yards. Their top rushing back was Christian Rodriguez Jr. with 11 carries for 52 yards, and Austin Ekeler had 11 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, their top receiver was Noah Brown, who had 5 receptions for 60 yards. Scary Terry had 2 receptions for 19 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Olamide Zaccheaus had 2 receptions for 48 yards. Looking at this Giants offense, Danny Dimes went 20 for 26, 174 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, which finally he threw a passing touchdown at MetLife. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is starting to break out here as a good-looking running back. He had 16 carries for 66 yards. Danny Dimes had 7 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. Their top receiver was obviously Malik Nabers with 9 receptions for 59 yards. Theo Johnson was their next closest with 3 receptions for 51 yards. Solid game. The Giants are always going to put up a fight, especially against division rivals for the most part, except the Eagles. So, yeah, these two have been going back and forth between winning for the past half a decade now. So, I'm not surprised that it's a close game at all. Commanders just do enough to win, though, especially off the back of Jaden Daniels. Next game, a really close game. Bills beat the Dolphins 30-27. Looking at this Dolphins offense, Tua was fairly efficient. He went 25 for 28, 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, Devon Achane had 12 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Raheem Mostert had 10 carries for 56 yards. Through the air, Tyreek Hill had 4 receptions for 80 yards. My prediction that he was going to break 2,000 yards is never going to look good, especially the way that the yardage that he's picking up, especially now. Devon Achane, also a big day through the air, 8 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Looking at this Bills offense, Josh Allen went 25 for 39, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. On the ground, James Cook went 10 for 44. Ray Davis went 4 for 20 on the ground. Through the air, Ray Davis had an even bigger day. He had 2 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Shakir was right behind him with 6 receptions for 50 yards. Keon Coleman was a little bit quiet today, only with one reception for 21 yards, and Amari Cooper is obviously was out for this game. I believe he'll be back next week. Again, the Bills just continue to exert their dominance on the division. What can I really say? Although I think the Dolphins are probably going to be better or more better than what people thought. Next up, we have the Chargers beating the Browns 27-10. Justin Herbert, fairly efficient, went 18 for 27, 282 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Whereas on the ground, J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading receiver was Quentin Johnson. I believe it's been a couple of weeks. I feel like Quentin has been out with an injury for the past couple of weeks, so it's nice to see him back on here. Quentin Johnson, 4 for 118 yards and a touchdown. Ladd McConkey was the next highest receiver with 5 receptions for 64 yards. And Josh Palmer right behind him with 2 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. Fairly efficient day for this Chargers offense. Looking at the Browns, Jameis Winston, 26 for 46, 235 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. I expect nothing less. I was really hoping that Jameis was going to become a consistent starter, but if you're having Jameis Winston throw for, I guess, over 45 times, he's going to throw 3+ turnovers, and there's going to be no exception. Nick Chubb, he's been fairly quiet ever since coming back from injury. He had 15 carries for 39 yards. Their top receiver was Cedric Tillman with 6 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown, followed by Jerry Jeudy with 7 receptions for 73 yards. David Njoku was fairly quiet today with 5 receptions for 29 yards, but overall, a solid performance from this receiving core. Jameis just can't turn over the ball. I mean, if you think about it, they were down by 3 possessions. So if they went down and converted those 3 interceptions into touchdowns instead, they probably would have came out of this game with a win. Overall, Chargers are playing better and better every week and are showing that they're quite a physical team, especially under Hardball. This is quite promising. They're in the running for a wild card spot, which we will touch on the playoff logistics once we get into like week 13, week 14-ish. I'll start watching that week by week on here on the podcast. But until then, we'll just keep on doing the standings. Looking at it, the next game I'll just go over quickly. Titans beat the Patriots 20-17 in overtime. That's definitely going to hurt the Titans in their drafting position. Mason Rudolph was starting. He went 20 for 33, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Rushing, Tony Pollard had a pretty big day, 28 carries for 128 yards. I think that's probably the best game I've seen him have so far as a Tennessee Titan. Their top receiver was obviously Calvin Ridley with 5 receptions for 73 yards. The next closest was Nick Westbrook. Nick Westbrook. I'm not even going to pronounce the hyphen part of the name. 5 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown, with Chisholm Okonkwo with 3 receptions, 38 yards right behind him. It seems like Mason did spread out the ball a bit and was able to do enough just to get his team the win in overtime. Looking at the other side of the equation, Drake May went 29 for 41, 206 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Not that promising of a day if you're having your rookie quarterback throw 41 times, but hey, what do I know? Drake May also led his team on the ground with 8 carries for 98 yards. That's not that good in theory. Well, it's good that he can use his legs, but it's not good that he's leading the team in rushing. Ramondre Stevenson, really quiet day, 10 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown. Through the air, Hunter Henry was their top receiver with 7 receptions for 56 yards. Kendrick Bourne right behind him with 4 receptions for 41 yards. and Demario Douglas right behind him with 7 receptions for 35 yards. Overall, the Titans just did enough to beat the Patriots, which is going to screw their drafting position just that little bit more. But yeah, what do I know, Titans? You guys can win your division. But yeah, Titans, don't get your hopes up. This is a Patriots team that I believe is projected to have the number 1 overall pick in the draft. But yeah, we're gonna see how both of these teams do and how what the Titans do at quarterback, whether they're sick with Mason Rudolph, and whether Drake May keeps developing. Though you cannot make him throw more than, I want to say, 25 times in a game. You want to run that ball and allow him to throw when it matters most. Falcons. Actually, let me go back to the last game real quick. Drake May did have actually a pretty good moment. He held onto the ball for felt like 20 seconds, and he just ran around in the pocket while it was collapsing, just waiting for a receiver to get open in the end zone. And while he was getting tackled, he threw a touchdown. I forget to who it was. I forget to who he threw the touchdown to, but that was a solid play that forced the game into overtime. Obviously, the team didn't win in overtime, but that's kind of promising in my eyes. But we need to stop making them throw 40-plus times a game to try to win. All right, next up we have the Falcons beating the Cowboys 27-21. Big Kirko Cousins swag surfing on this Cowboys defense. Kirk went 19 for 24, 222 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rushing, a pretty solid day from Bijan Robinson, 19 carries for 86 yards. And receiving, their top receiver was Darnell Mooney with 5 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. Bijan was right behind him with 7 receptions for 59 yards. And Ray McCloud was right behind him with 3 receptions for 28 yards and a touchdown. Quiet day from Drake London and Kyle Pitts, though they were going up against Trevon Diggs, who is one of the better corners in the league. So I don't think you can kind of complain, especially with Kirk just finding a way to win with other pieces around him. Looking at this Dallas offense, they went 18, or Dak Prescott went 18 for 24 and a touchdown. He unfortunately suffered a pretty severe hamstring injury. Apparently, he'll be out for at least 4 weeks. He also got caught saying that the team sucks on the sideline, which is pretty funny to me. Cooper Rush had to come in. I forgot that they still had him. He went 13 for 25, 115 yards and a touchdown. So he kind of did the same as he had more attempts than Dak, but had around the same kind of stats as Dak, which is kind of funny to me. Their top rusher was Rico Dowell, who had 12 carries for 75 yards. Zeke didn't travel with the team for personal reasons, so they really had to rely on Rico Dowell and Dalvin Cook, who really couldn't do anything. Receiving, Jake Ferguson had 7 receptions for 71 yards. CD was right behind him with 8 receptions for 47 yards. He also suffered an injury during the game. I believe it was like a shoulder. He's believed to be ready to play before this weekend. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that unless there's any more underlying things we don't know about. Overall, a solid win for the Falcons. They just have to continue to increase their lead in the NFC South, and they'll be probably a solid playoff team in my eyes, like I said earlier this season. Moving on, we have Bengals Raiders. This was a curb stomping. The Bengals beat the Raiders 41-24. It's not even as close as the score indicates. Joe Burrow went 27 for 39, 251 yards, 5 touchdowns on the air, through the air, and an interception. Rushing, Chase Brown had a pretty big day, 27 carries for 120 yards. And receiving, their top receiver was Mike Gesicki with 5 receptions for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Quiet day from Jamar, only 7 receptions for 43 yards and no touchdowns. Overall, the Bengals look pretty solid. Joe Burrow is looking more confident. We'll see if they can carry this momentum into this Thursday, which I'll give you guys my opinions on. But yeah. Next up, we have the Raiders, who had 2 quarterbacks start for them during the game. Gardner Minshew, who was expected to start, who went 10 for 17, 124 yards. And Desmond Ridder, who went 11 for 16, 74 yards and a touchdown. I'm not sure if Gardner suffered an injury. No, they just benched him. It seems like it doesn't look like he got injured. It looks like Antonio Pierce just benched him. Their top rusher was Alexander Madison with 9 carries for 36 yards. Zamir White had 6 carries for 10 yards and a touchdown. Receiving was more where they got a lot of their stats. Jacoby Myers, 8 receptions for 105 yards. Brock Bowers continues to be a threat with 5 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. Jack Jones had the interception on Burrow. But other than that, I don't really want to get too in-depth with it, but it was just a solid day for Joe Burrow and the Bengals trying to rebound after that loss to the Eagles. Next up, I'm going to go through this game quickly as well. Baltimore Ravens beat the Broncos 41-10. People thought that the Broncos were going to give Lamar and the Ravens trouble. I never really saw that. I saw really probably just a freight train coming through. Congratulations to Derrick Henry on passing 100 career rushing touchdowns, I believe. I believe he hit 101 during the game, so that's very impressive, and that's the only other running back that's really contending with Saquon for best running back in the league. Lamar went 16 for 19, 280 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Derrick Henry had 23 carries and 106 yards to 2 touchdowns. Receiving, Zay Flowers is finally their top receiver for a game. Zay Flowers had 5 receptions for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nice to see Zay start to get going. Let's see if he can continue this pattern into later weeks. Justin Hill had 3 receptions for 43 yards. Nelson Agholor had 1 reception for 29 yards. Overall, a good day for this Ravens offense. On the Broncos offense, Bo Nix went 19 for 33, 223 yards and an interception. Javonte Williams had 12 carries for 42 yards. And in receiving, Courtland Sutton was their top receiver with 7 receptions for 122 yards. Javonte Williams was their second close, which is kind of scary that it was only 2 receptions for 42 yards. The only person with a touchdown on the day was a Bo Nix receiving touchdown from a Courtland Sutton pass. That was interesting. They tried to run the Philly special. They just barely got it off, but yeah. A very, very interesting day for the Ravens and the Broncos. Next up, we have the Bears and Cardinals. Cardinals beat the Bears 29-9. Looking at this Bears offense, Caleb Williams, again another rookie quarterback throwing for 40-plus times. Caleb went 22 for 41, 217 yards. Rushing was a pretty abysmal for the day. DeAndre Swift had 16 carries for 51 yards. Their top receiver for the day was Rome Odunze with 5 receptions for 104 yards. Keenan Allen was their next closest with 4 receptions for 36 yards. Yeah, that's a little bit concerning that they had to force Caleb to throw 40-plus times to try to win, and they only got I believe they only kicked 3 field goals, so that's slightly concerning. Bears are starting to slide in most people's power rankings, and in my eyes, they're starting to show the team that they are rather than the team that they could be. Whereas the Cardinals are actually looking a lot better so far this season. Kyler Murray went 13 for 20, 154 yards. So not a huge day passing, but rushing was where it was at. Their top rusher was James Conner, had 18 carries for 107 yards. Right behind him was Amari DeMarcado with 4 carries and 59 yards and a touchdown, and Trey Benson right behind them with 8 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown. Uh, Fairly big day rushing. Passing, obviously, as I said earlier, not as big of a day. Trey McBride was their top receiver with 3 receptions for 35 yards. Elijah Higgins was right behind him with 2 receptions for 34 yards. And Marvin Harrison tied Elijah Higgins' stats at 2 receptions for 34 yards. Overall, a solid win for this Cardinals team that just needs to continue to get wins against bad teams to keep on building the lead, the 1-game lead that they have in the NFC West right now. Next up, we have Rams Seahawks. Rams walk it off with a walk-off touchdown in overtime. They beat the Seahawks 26-20. Matthew Stafford went 25 for 44, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Right behind him was Kyren Williams with 22 carries to 69 yards. Rushing, I don't know why I said right behind him. Receiving, Cooper Kupp went 11 for 104 yards, and Demarcus Robinson had 6 receptions for 94 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, which one of those was the walk-off touchdown in overtime. Looking at this Seahawks offense, Geno Smith had a pretty bad day. He went 21 for 34, 363 yards. But where it gets bad is he had 3 touchdowns with 3 interceptions as well. Rushing, Kenneth Walker was a little bit underwhelming. 25 carries for 83 yards. And receiving, I know DK Metcalf has been out a couple times this year. This happens to be one of the games that he was out. JSN had 7 receptions for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett, next closest receiver, with 3 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. Overall, I feel like this was more of a Seattle loss than a Rams win, in my opinion, only because the Seahawks, after starting 3-0, have gone 1-5 in their last 6 games, which is slightly concerning. Geno is not looking as efficient as he was in the beginning of the season, whereas the Rams started off poorly in this season and are starting to heat up, start to put some wins together to then eventually make a run for the playoffs later in the season. They have to continue to beat division rivals like Seattle throughout the rest of the season, but if how they've been playing continues, they will continue to be a dangerous team, especially in the NFC playoff picture. Next up, we have Lions-Packers. This was a pretty big NFC playoff, or this was a pretty big just NFC game in general for the implications on how the rest of the teams stack up. This was played at Lambeau in rainy Lambeau outdoors. Lions beat the Packers 24-14. Jared Goff went 18 for 22, 145 yards, and a touchdown. He continues the theme of being efficient with his passing, not having to pass too much, and not getting too many passing yards, but still doing enough to get his team the win. Rushing was pretty solid for splitting the carries between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery had 17 carries for 73 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 11 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 7 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown. Sam Laporta had 2 receptions for 28 yards, and David Montgomery right behind him with 3 receptions for 23 yards. Looking at this Packers offense, let's see here. Jordan Love went 23 for 39, 273 yards and an interception. People did note that he did not look 100%, especially with that groin injury. It seemed to be bothering him, especially during the game. So that is something that we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on, though it's lucky that they're going into their bye week with him dealing with that injury. Their top rusher was Josh Jacobs, who had 13 carries for 95 yards. Emmanuel Wilson was the next closest with 4 carries for 28 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, Jaden Reed had 5 receptions, or led the team in receiving with 5 receptions for 113 yards. And Christian Watson was the next closest with 3 receptions for 37 yards. Overall, this was a big win for Detroit, especially on the road at Lambeau Field. Overall, the Lions continue to roll and continue to be red hot, especially against good teams like the Packers. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Packers respond when they go into Detroit to play Detroit. Next up, we have Colts-Vikings. I'll go over this one quick because this one was a snooze fest. Vikings beat the Colts 21-13. Joe Flacco went 16 for 27, 179 yards and an interception. Jonathan Taylor, 13 carries for 48 yards. Receiving, Josh Downs was their top receiver with 6 receptions for 60 yards. And Alec Pierce was the next closest receiver at 3 receptions for 41 yards. Sam Darnold, similar to Joe Flacco, went 28 for 34, so he was more efficient with the ball where he was putting it. Had 290 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, which is a little bit concerning. Needs to stop turning over the ball, and which gave the Colts more life. He also fumbled the ball, so I believe he had 3 turnovers during the game. Rushing, Aaron Jones, still a pretty solid day for him. 21 carries for 64 yards. Receiving was where the big statement of the game was. Justin Jefferson, obviously their top receiver, had 7 receptions for 137 yards. Right behind him was Josh Oliver with 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. And right behind him was Jordan Addison with 5 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. Overall, a good win for the Vikings. It is concerning that Sam Darnold is turning over the ball 3 times. He needs to cut back on that to make sure that they have the best chance to win. But overall, pretty solid day for the Vikings. Next up, we have Monday Night Football. The Chiefs beating the Bucs 30-24 in overtime. Patrick Mahomes went 34 for 44, 291 yards, 3 touchdowns. There's a second there. It looked like he could have gotten injured, which is slightly concerning for Chiefs fans. Not for me. I wouldn't have cared. But, fairly efficient day. Their top rusher was Kareem Hunt, who went 27 for 106 and a touchdown. And Travis Kelce was finally their leading receiver for a game this season, and he finally got 100 receiving yards. They kind of force-fed him the ball because it was raining, so short passes worked best for Patty Mahomes. He went 14 for 100 yards. 14 receptions for 100 yards. DeAndre Hopkins had a big day. He had 8 receptions for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looking at this Bucs offense, Baker went 23 for 31, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Solid day, especially with no turnovers, which has been a problem with Baker. Solid day for Baker. Rushing, Bucky Irving was their top rusher with 7 carries for 24 yards. That is slightly concerning because they're out a few main receivers. Next up, we have Their top receiver was Cade Otton, who had 8 receptions for 77 yards and a touchdown. Right behind him, it was a really solid day, and the stats don't really show it, but Sterling Shepard had a really solid day with 4 receptions for 48 yards. Overall, the Chiefs continue to be the Chiefs and play consistent football and are able to pull out the win in overtime against the Bucs. They are currently 8-0, so this is going to be interesting on how everything starts to shake up. All right, so going through all the past weekend's games, some quick notes that I have from around the league. Yesterday, on Tuesday, November 5th, was the trade deadline day. Several trades got put through. Commanders traded for Marshawn Lattimore. Steelers acquired both Mike Williams and edge Preston Smith. And the Lions, scarily enough, got Zadarius Smith to add on to that defensive line there. And with how hot the Lions are playing right now, that is slightly concerning in my eyes for the rest of the NFL, not even the NFC. Cowboys got fleeced on a trade for Jonathan Mingo. I believe they traded like a 4th-round pick for him when the rest of the league were trading 5th-round picks for receivers. Right about now, they traded I believe it was a 4th and I want to say a 6th for Jonathan Mingo and a 7th. So yeah, let's just say that the Lions got fleeced there. As we continue the NFC East, the race for the first place continues to heat up every week, with both the Eagles and Commanders being on a winning streak. Right now, it's going to come down to who loses first, and then it's going to come down to the games that they play one another. Cardinals are slowly becoming a more quietly dominant team in the NFC West and in the NFC as a whole. It's going to be interesting to see how they continue to play through the rest of the season and whether they're able to win the division, with the Rams starting to pick up steam and Christian McCaffrey coming back for the 49ers next week. So it's going to be interesting to see how this NFC West race plays out. But as of right now, the Cardinals are slowly becoming the favorites to win. The Saints, after losing to the Panthers, I alluded to this earlier, but they finally fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, after losing 7 games straight after starting 2-0. Yeah, they're historically bad. It's really, I won't even say upsetting, but it's just really interesting that a team that started out that hot has now dropped 7 straight games entirely. So next up, we're looking at the NFL standings. In the AFC East, we have the Bills with a commanding lead over the rest of the division, being 7-2. Jets are the next closest team at 3-6. Dolphins behind them at 2-6, and Patriots behind them at 2-7. In the AFC West, again, similar to the AFC East, Chiefs have a commanding 8-0 lead. Chargers are 5-3, right behind them. Right behind the Chargers are the Broncos at 5-4, and at the basement of the division are the Raiders at 2-7. In the AFC North, it continues to be a tight battle, with the Steelers currently in the lead at 6-2, Ravens behind them at 6-3, Bengals in third at 4-5, and Browns at the bottom at 2-7. I don't think they're going to have any chance to be competitive in this division anymore this season. Next up, we have the AFC South, which the Texans are in the lead of at 6-3. Colts are the next closest at 4-5, and the other two teams, Titans and Jags. Titans are just ahead of the Jags at 2-6, and the Jags are at the bottom at 2-7. Realistically, this is probably the Texans' division to lose right now. But if the Colts can start to string together some wins and the Texans continue to play as shaky as they have been, I wouldn't be overly surprised if it came down to the last few games of the season to decide that division. Next up, we have the NFC East, which the Commanders are in the lead of at 7-2. Eagles right behind them at 6-2. Cowboys at 3-5, and Giants at the bottom at 2-7. Next up, we have the NFC West, which I had talked about earlier. The Cardinals are in first at 5-4. Rams at 4-4. Seahawks at 4-4. 49ers at 4-4, and Seahawks at the bottom at 4-5. NFC North is still a tightly contested battle. Lions are at 7-1. Vikings are at 6-2. Packers are at 6-3. Bears are at 4-4. Next up in the NFC South, the Falcons are 6-3. Bucks are 4-5, and Panthers and Saints are both at the bottom at 2-7. All right, so I just wanted to give my quick takes around the NFL right now of who are the top 5 teams. Later in the season, I'm going to revisit this and talk about who are the top 5 teams and who are going to be the top 5 worst teams. But that will be later in the season. Right now, in my humble opinion, the top 5 teams currently are the Lions at 1. Man, they're red hot and they continue to play efficient. I would be interested to see how they would play against the Chiefs if they did, but they don't in the regular season. After the Lions, it's obviously the Chiefs. Chiefs are undefeated and continue to play well. Their play hasn't dropped off at all, although it hasn't been spectacular. They've just done enough to win. Next up, right behind the Chiefs, would be the Ravens. They continue every weekend to put in. Since starting 2-0, they've continued to put in a stellar effort and continue to play well, especially when they run the ball and don't force Lamar to throw too much. At 4, I currently have the Buffalo Bills. They've been on a win streak for a little bit now. They've been on a 4-game win streak. It'll be interesting to see if Josh can continue to play as well as he is, especially into the playoffs. But yes, I have the Bills at 4, and then at 5, it may seem a little bit cliche, but I currently have the Eagles at 5, only because we have started to accumulate some wins, whereas a lot of other teams around our record have played somewhat shakily in the past couple of weeks. But that's just my opinion of the top 5 teams. Obviously, when I'll probably adjust them when it comes to week 17, week 18, and then I'll give you the 5 worst teams in the league, which will probably be it may not even be like the 5 top 5 picks. It may be teams that start out hot, or teams that started out cold, got hot, and then went cold again, and have started to lose games. But we'll get into that when the time comes. Alright, so we're going to blitz through this weekend's games and my picks. Last weekend I went 10-5, and overall in the season I am 90-48 when doing my picks. On Thursday Night Football, we have the Ravens-Bengals. Realistically, this is probably going to be a tighter game than most people think, but I have the Ravens pulling out a solid win because the Bengals have proved that it's hard for them to stop the run, especially when they played the Eagles. Next up, we have Giants and Panthers in Germany. I do have the Giants pulling this out. I just don't believe in the Panthers, and although they might get 1 or 2 upset wins, it's just not enough in my opinion. Next up, we have Bears-Patriots. I'm definitely going to take the Bears in this matchup only because I have more belief in the pieces around Caleb than I do have in the pieces around Drake. So we'll see this. It's going to be a battle of the 1 and 3, but I do see Caleb playing better, especially against this Patriots defense. Next up, we have Bills-Colts. Give me the Bills easily. I feel like the Bills might get a blowout. I'm calling this. I get one blowout call every week. Uh, I feel like this is going to be the blowout this week. Bills will probably win this like 38 to 14, 38 to 17. They'll get a really hearty win in this game, I feel like. Although I could see the Broncos possibly beating the Chiefs like they did last year out of nowhere, give me the Chiefs until somebody can prove to me that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid can be beat and their consistency goes down. I can't really bet against this Chiefs team. Next up, we have Saints-Falcons. Give me the Falcons with all the turmoil going on in the Saints organization right now, and with Chris Olave most likely being out and Rashid Shaheed being out for the season. I just have more faith in this Falcons offense than I do have in this Saints offense. Next up, we have 49ers Bucks. 49ers get back Christian McCaffrey this week, and I'm not sure if Baker's going to be able to find his magic, so give me the 49ers. I'm not sure this is going to be a good year for Baker for the rest of the year, or at least until Mike Evans gets back. So yeah, give me the 49ers in the CMC return. We have Steelers Commanders. Give me the Steelers. I feel like the Steelers will just do just enough to beat the Commanders, but yeah, I have more faith in Mike Tomlin than I do in Dan Quinn right now. So just give me that. Give me the Steelers, and I feel like the Steelers' defense is going to be the main focal point of this game. We have Jags-Vikings, although it might be closer than what most people think. Give me the Vikings. Vikings winning this pretty well. Darnold doesn't turn the ball over. It's going to be a really good win for this Vikings squad. Next up, we have Chargers-Titans. Give me the Chargers all day. Chargers are putting together some wins. They're currently on a 2-game win streak, so it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to play. But this is a real physical team against a Titans team that can't really go toe-to-toe with anybody that's even remotely a decent team right now. Next up, we have Cowboys at Dallas. Still give me the Eagles only because Cooper Rush is playing. If Dak was playing, I would be a little bit more hesitant in picking the Eagles. But give me the Eagles winning pretty well, and especially if A.J. Brown comes back, it's going to be it's going to possibly be the first time that the Eagles win at Dallas since 2017. So give me the Eagles. I feel like they win pretty handily in this maybe one-sided or lopsided matchup. Next up, we have the Jets-Cardinals. Give me the Jets. Although the Cardinals are playing well, I feel like the Jets are more in a situation where their back is up against the wall and they have to win. And Aaron Rodgers will continue to almost force this team to win if he has to. Next up, we have Lions-Texans. Give me the Lions every day of the week. They're going to, similar to the Chiefs, if somebody can prove to me that they can be that their consistent play can be beat, then that's when I'll start to put my eggs in somebody else's basket. But until then, give me Motor City Dan Campbell and the Lions going down to Houston and beating up this Texan squad. Finally, we have Dolphins-Rams. As much as I think everybody wants to go for the Rams and for how hot they've been, I feel like this weekend's showing proves to me that the Dolphins are real and that they will continue to build, and especially with the Rams trading away a corner to the Ravens before the deadline, I feel like they're going to be maybe under-equipped for this matchup, especially in their secondary. All right, so that is it for this weekend, or for this week's episode of the podcast. I hope you all enjoyed. Remember, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and follow us on Twitter if you want to interact with me. This has been your host, Matt, and I hope you have a good day, and always remember, go Birds.